So, God gives us all different gifts, and my gift has always been the gift of conviction. I've never been that great a speaker, so if you'll indulge me, I got a couple notes that I jotted down, and I might refer to those as I talk for a couple minutes. And I would say, first of all, I just want to say thank you, and it was just mentioned a moment ago, for being the absolute patriots that you are. Because fundamentally what today is all about, what Tax Day is about, what this rally is all about, is this larger notion of patriotism and holding true to principles that made this country great in the first place. And would you all give yourselves a round of applause on that front? And the reason that I say patriot is because historically, as Jim was just alluding to, civilizations have had this awful habit of spending their way into oblivion. And so the great patriotism that you all are showing is really about this larger notion of saying, wait a minute, while certain civilizations have certainly gone that way throughout the passage of time, that is not the route that we want for our kids, our grandkids, and the children after them. I would say, secondly, that this gathering is all about this larger notion of liberty, which is deeply rooted here in Charleston. You know, in colonial times, each of the original colonies actually had basically a liberty tree. And there was a liberty tree right here in Charleston, South Carolina. And patriots would gather under that tree, and when the British took over, it was so hated that they actually not only cut the tree, but they tried to burn the roots, they tried to hack at the roots. But years later, a judge came by after the British had left, and he gathered up a piece of that root, and he made a number of different walking canes, one of which he actually gave to Thomas Jefferson. And what was interesting about that root is that it had gathered back sprouts, was coming back to life, which is what is so alive in every one of our hearts, this larger notion of liberty and freedom that ultimately y'all are all pushing for. And would you give yourselves a round of applause on that front as well? And so I really have just a couple of different questions, since we agree on that larger notion of this being ultimately about liberty, and that is on where we go from here. And so my questions are as follows. Do you want to add another $1 trillion of national debt to the government rolls this year? Do you want to raise taxes to pay for that debt this year? Do you think it's wise for government to spend more and to run bigger deficits than we ever have before in the history of this civilization? Do you think it's wise for government to go out and bail out big auto companies, big banks, big insurance companies, and big state governments? I thought that might be the case, and so I got an idea. Cal Thomas wrote an article in today's paper in which he said simply this: not a penny more. And so it seems to me that what today is ultimately all about is that larger notion of drawing a line in the sand and saying, whether it's with big auto, whether it's with big insurance company, whether it's with big banks, or whether it's indeed with state governments, we have got to draw a line in the sand that says not a penny more until reforms and changes are made in every one of those institutions. And so I guess my simple question would be, will we use this tax day, as you go home tonight, and as you talk to 2 friends, or 5 friends, or 10 friends, will we use this as a rallying cry in beginning this larger notion of changing the way that things are done in America so that our kids have better opportunity going forward? Will we do that? Will we use this tax day as a wake-up call to remind Americans that a problem that was created by too much debt will never be solved with yet more debt? Will we use this tax day to remind Americans that this notion that you cannot spin your way into prosperity, and that you cannot print ultimately money that you don't have without very bad things happening to that currency that we hold dear? And I got just 2 more. Can we use this tax day to remind Americans and South Carolinians that there is no such thing as free money, and that even applies to this notion of stimulus? And And can we use this tax day to remind Americans and to remind South Carolinians that this old-fashioned American notion of paying down debt is in fact not such a bad idea after all. And I guess I'll leave you with this one final thought. Can we use this tax day to remind folks, friends, neighbors alike, that things don't just happen in life? They happen in part because of our will, because of the fact that you'd come out here on a Wednesday afternoon on tax day to stand up for something that you believed in. And in part they happen because of God's providence, God's will. And you combine those two, and that combination, despite some popular opinions coming out of Washington these days, is in fact the winning formula that has made this country great for more than 200 years. If you look on the back of a dollar bill, it says E pluribus unum, and it says a nunc septus from the many one, and it talks about how the Israelites made it out of the land of Pharaohs into the promised land because of will and because of God's will. And what ultimately y'all are about standing up for is this larger notion that God bestowed us with of liberty and freedom, which is common to every heart out there, every mind out there. And I want to say thank you again for standing up for that greater principle. Thanks again for what y'all do.
Governor Mark Sanford, everybody.